The champagne glass shattered against the wall, inches from my face, silencing the entire reception hall. My mother-in-law's words cut deeper than any glass ever could. "What are you expecting, you menopausal old woman? You're nothing but desperate, trying to steal my son's youth." I stood frozen in my wedding dress, the white fabric suddenly feeling like a shroud around my trembling body. The guests' horrified gasps seemed to come from miles away, while Eleanor's cold blue eyes, so much like her son's, burned into mine with undisguised hatred. What she didn't know was that across the room, another pair of identical green eyes to mine were watching. Eyes that belonged to someone who had built and destroyed empires. My twin sister Carol had returned after 20 years, and as I felt a tear slide down my cheek, I caught her almost imperceptible nod. The slight curve of her lips promised something that sent a chill down my spine. My mother-in-law had just made the worst mistake of her life, but she had no idea what was coming for her. Eleanor's venom still hung in the air as I stood frozen in my wedding dress. How did I end up here? My mind raced back to the beginning. I'm Marion Gray, 53-year-old CEO of GrayMed Technologies. I built my company from nothing, sacrificing personal life for professional success. After my divorce 10 years ago, I convinced myself that loneliness was the price of achievement. Then Jason Collins walked into my life. I still remember the electricity in the conference room when he presented his neural interface startup. At 32, he radiated confidence and compassion, speaking about patients with such genuine care that I found myself approaching him afterward. "Your technology could change lives," I told him, offering investment. "I'd like to help make that happen." His smile lit something within me I thought had died years ago. What began as business meetings evolved into long dinners discussing not just technology, but books, music, dreams. I fought the growing attraction, creating distance whenever our connection threatened to become personal. "Why do you pull away?" he asked one night, his blue eyes searching mine. "Jason, I'm old enough to be your mother," I said, my voice catching. "This can't happen." "Age is just a number, Marion," he replied, his gaze never wavering. "When I look at you, I see the most brilliant, passionate woman I've ever met." I changed the subject, but his words haunted me. When a competitor threatened his company with patent challenges, I found Jason in his cluttered office, defeated for the first time since I'd known him. My heart ached seeing him so vulnerable. "We'll fight this together," I promised, increasing GrayMed's investment. "I believe in you." That night, over dinner at my apartment, something shifted between us. He told me about his childhood, with a mother who worked constant hospital shifts, leaving him emotionally neglected. "I learned early not to need too much," he confessed, the sadness in his voice mirroring my own lonely past. "After my divorce, I shut down emotionally," I admitted. "I convinced myself work was enough." "And now?" he asked quietly. My heart raced as our eyes locked. "Now I'm not so sure." My board members warned me. My friend Rachel was particularly blunt. "Be careful, Marion. Young, handsome men like him target successful women for their resources." But Jason proved them wrong at every turn. When my father had a health scare, Jason sat with me in the hospital all night. When competitors questioned my judgment, he defended me fiercely. Most importantly, we shared the same vision, using technology to improve lives, not just profit margins. "It's like you're reading my mind," he said once as we finished each other's sentences during a late-night brainstorming session. I tried to ignore the warmth spreading through my chest. After successfully fighting off the patent challenge, we celebrated in my office. As I handed him a champagne glass, our fingers touched, and this time I didn't pull away. "I've fallen in love with you," he said simply. "Not your position or company, just you." The glass trembled in my hand. "Jason, this is complicated for so many reasons. Name one that isn't about age or what others might think." I couldn't. When he kissed me, years of loneliness melted away. I felt alive again. Our relationship remained private at first. I was terrified of the whispers, the judgment. But Jason's unwavering pride in us gave me courage. Gradually, I stopped hiding, though each raised eyebrow at industry events stung. After a year, he proposed at my lake house, the setting sun making his earnest face glow as he knelt before me. "I know people will talk," he said, holding a vintage emerald ring. "Let them. I want to build a future with you, Marion." Fear washed over me. "In 20 years, I'll be in my 70s while you'll still be young. And I'll still love every line on your face," he said with such conviction that tears filled my eyes. My father's approval surprised me most. When I nervously showed him the ring, his weathered face broke into a smile I hadn't seen since before my mother died. "Don't let fear steal your happiness, Marbert," he said, using my childhood nickname. The wedding plans proceeded quickly. It wasn't until a month before that Jason hesitantly mentioned his mother. "Eleanor wants to meet you," he said, tension visible in his shoulders. I looked up, surprised. "You've barely mentioned her all year." He sighed. "We have a complicated relationship. After my father left, she became controlling. We've been distant for years." "Of course she should come," I reassured him. "She's your mother." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you. She can be difficult, but she's my only family." I should have recognized the warning in his eyes. Eleanor Collins arrived unannounced 3 days before the wedding. At 55, she was barely older than me, a fact that clearly amused her as she assessed me with calculating eyes identical to Jason's, but lacking his warmth. "So you're the woman who swept my boy off his feet," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. How unexpected. That first dinner was an exercise in restraint as Eleanor deployed perfectly aimed barbs disguised as conversation. "It must be comforting to have a younger man's energy around," she commented. "Especially at our age." Each remark highlighted our age difference, each delivered with a smile that dared me to object. When I mentioned it to Jason later, he sighed. "She's just protective. Give her time." I nodded, unwilling to create tension before our wedding. But that night, lying awake beside him, I couldn't shake the predatory gleam I'd seen in Eleanor's eyes, calculating, measuring for weakness. The next morning, she examined photos in my living room, lingering on one of my father and me. "Your father seems lovely," she said. "Jason only has me, you know. We've been each other's whole world since his father abandoned us." Her words felt weighted with warning. "Well, now he'll have both of us," I countered evenly. Eleanor's smile turned brittle. "Yes. Almost like I'm gaining a daughter, or perhaps a slightly older sister." I maintained my composure, telling myself, it was only for 2 more days. For Jason's sake. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright. As I studied my reflection, I saw a woman with laugh lines and hard-earned confidence in a simple, elegant ivory sheath dress. The ringing phone startled me. "Unknown number," my assistant said. "Hello? Marion?" The voice was achingly familiar yet distant. "Carol?" It was my twin sister, who disappeared from my life 20 years ago. "Surprise? Dad told me you were getting married." "I'm sorry, I can't make it today. I'm in Frankfurt." 20 years of silence, and now this? It's been a long time. "Too long," she admitted. "I miss you, Marion. We should talk, but not today. Today is your day." After we hung up, my father entered in his tuxedo. "Marbert," he whispered. "You're the spitting image of your mother." His words melted the ice Carol's call had left. I told him about her call. "I hoped she might reach out," he said. "She's changed, but I think she regrets the time you've lost." He squeezed my hands. I'm proud of you. Your Jason is a good man. I nodded, pushing away my uncertainty about Eleanor. Walking down the aisle on my father's arm, I saw Jason's face light up with love. All my doubts vanished. This was right. The reception began smoothly. Happy? Jason murmured in my ear. Completely, I replied. It happened during the toasts. After my father's speech, Eleanor stood, champagne flute in hand. Jason tensed beside me. I'd like to say a few words about my son, she began with a syrupy voice that sent alarm bells ringing. As she spoke about Jason's childhood, her glances my way grew increasingly hostile. My Jason has always been special, she said. Such a bright future ahead of him. Which is why today is difficult for a mother who wants the best for her child. Jason rose. Mom. She waved him off. Everyone's thinking it. What exactly does a woman of Marion's maturity want with my son? What could she offer besides money? Horrified silence fell. My face drained of color. When I was younger than Jason, I was seduced by an older man who promised me the world. He used me, then discarded me when I became pregnant. Her eyes burned with hatred. I recognized predatory behavior. That's enough, Jason said sharply. What are you expecting? Children? You'll be using a walker while he's still in his prime. She laughed. Or is that the plan? Lock him down so when you're decrepit, he's legally obligated to care for you? The champagne glass shattered against the wall near my face, silencing the room. What are you expecting, you menopausal old woman? You're nothing but desperate, stealing my son's youth, she screamed. I stood frozen, my wedding dress feeling like a shroud around my trembling body. Guests' horrified gasps seemed distant as Eleanor's cold blue eyes burned into mine. Jason moved between us. Mother, stop immediately. I'm trying to save you, she cried. She's using you, just like I was used. I finally found my voice. Jason, please take your mother outside. As Jason guided her toward the exit, movement at the entrance caught my attention. A woman stood there in a slate blue dress, her silver-streaked hair arranged exactly like mine. Carol. Our eyes met across the chaos, and I caught her slight nod. The curve of her lips promised retribution. I knew that look from childhood, when someone hurt me and she planned revenge. Eleanor noticed and turned. Her tirade faltered as she saw my twin, my exact reflection. After Jason led Eleanor out, I stood humiliated, aware of every pitying glance. Well, I always did have flair for dramatic entrances, Carol said, striding toward me. Though someone stole my thunder. She took my hands in hers. Hello, Marbear. 20 years of distance crumbled as I fell into her embrace. You came, I whispered. Of course I came. I couldn't miss my twin's wedding. She held me at arm's length. Now, who was that delightful woman throwing glasses at you? Despite everything, I laughed. My new mother-in-law. Charming. I look forward to getting better acquainted. The predatory gleam in her eye made me almost pity Eleanor. Jason returned later, apologetic. Marion, I'm so sorry. I never thought she would. He trailed off, noticing Carol. She's not well, he explained. I've called her a car. She won't be returning. That night, after guests had left, Jason squeezed my hand. I should check on her. Just for a few minutes. Of course, I replied numbly. After he left, Carol appeared with scotch. I thought you might need this. As we drank on the balcony, she listened to my story. There's something not right, she finally said. That wasn't a breakdown. That was a performance. She's mentally unstable, I countered. I saw a woman who knew exactly what she was doing, Carol replied. For what purpose? That's what we need to find out. Where's Jason now? With her. At her hotel. On your wedding night. Carol's voice was flat. And you're okay with that? I stared at the city lights. What choice do I have? She's his mother. She's a viper, Carol said. And I'm worried she's not the only one. When Jason returned after midnight, he found me alone. She's asleep, he said, not meeting my eyes. The doctor prescribed something. He knelt before me. Marion, please believe me. I had no idea she would do that. Looking into his earnest eyes, I wanted desperately to believe him. Our wedding is not ruined, I said. We're married. That's what matters. As I fell asleep in his arms, I couldn't shake the image of Eleanor's face as she'd thrown that glass, not unhinged, but focused. Purposeful. And somewhere across the city, that same woman was planning her next move. 6 months after our wedding, Jason and I had found our rhythm. His startup thrived under my guidance, and despite our rocky beginning, our partnership, both professional and personal, felt strong. Eleanor had become a carefully managed presence in our lives, weekly calls with Jason, monthly calls with me full of pleasantries and subtle digs I ignored. She'd returned to Phoenix after our wedding, making occasional visits that Jason orchestrated to minimize conflict. She's lonely, Jason would say whenever I expressed concern about her behavior. She's still adjusting. My comfortable routine shattered when my father's caregiver called. Dr. Gray, your father had a fall this morning. At the hospital, Dad looked smaller and more fragile than ever. Marbert, he said. No need for all this fuss. The CT scan revealed early-stage dementia. His brilliant mind had been compensating until it couldn't anymore. He'll need comprehensive care, the neurologist explained. The disease will progress. I sat stunned as the doctor outlined options: memory care facilities, home care, medications that might slow but couldn't stop the decline. Jason took notes, asked questions, and held my hand when tears threatened. We'll figure this out. We can convert the guest room and hire the best care team. Over the next weeks, Jason proved himself the partner I needed. He researched care options, interviewed nurses, and spent evenings talking with Dad about neuroscience, noting which topics still engaged him. He's brilliant, Jason said. The way his mind works, even now, remarkable. My heart swelled with gratitude watching them together. This was the man I'd married, compassionate, genuinely interested in my father's well-being. As Dad settled into our home, I juggled caregiving with my CEO responsibilities, working longer hours to manage both. Jason stepped up remarkably, developing routines with Dad, chess games, discussions about medical innovations, old movies they both enjoyed. I understand now, Jason said one night. Why you are who you are. Your father's kindness, his intelligence, I see it in you. Despite my father's diagnosis, I found myself happy. My marriage felt solid, built on mutual respect and care. Then came the call that changed everything. My mother's sick, Jason said, his face pale. Her doctor thinks it's chronic fatigue syndrome. She can barely get out of bed. I felt a pang of sympathy despite my complicated feelings toward Eleanor. She's alone, he continued. She should come stay with us. Just until she's stronger. My first instinct was refusal, but the pain in Jason's eyes made my objections die in my throat. Of course, I heard myself say. She's your mother. 2 days later, Eleanor arrived looking genuinely unwell, pale and shaky. I'd prepared the small office as a bedroom for her. Marion, she said weakly, thank you for this. I know I'm imposing you. Not at all, I lied. Family helps family. For the first week, Eleanor remained mostly in her room. Jason spent hours with her, bringing tea, adjusting pillows, consulting with doctors. But gradually, subtle changes began. Eleanor started interrupting my time with Dad, complaining about her pain. When I worked late, she'd call for Jason's help with increasingly trivial matters. "Mom, Marion needs my help with her father tonight," I overheard Jason say. "But the pain is so bad," Eleanor whispered dramatically. "And William has his nurse. I have no one when you're not here." Jason spent that evening with her instead. Eleanor's symptoms worsened whenever my father needed attention or Jason and I had planned time together. "I don't want to be a burden," she'd say, even as she became exactly that. More concerning were the changes in my father. He became confused more often, especially after Eleanor spent time with him. Twice I found her helping with his medication. "I was a nurse for 30 years, she reminded me when questioned. "I know how to administer medication." Dad's prescriptions began running out too quickly, and his calm demeanor shifted to agitation after Eleanor's visits. When I mentioned my concerns to Jason, he grew defensive. "Mom's trying to help. She's sick too. You're being paranoid." The word stung. "I'm not paranoid. I'm observant. My mother wouldn't hurt your father," he insisted. "Why would she?" "Why indeed?" The question haunted me as I watched Eleanor integrate herself more fully into our lives. Her health improved just enough to attend Jason's business functions, but never enough to consider returning home. 3 months into her stay, I found Eleanor in my office, going through my files. "I was looking for a pen," she said smoothly. "That night, I called Carol. 'I need you to come.' 'I'll be there tomorrow,' my sister replied without hesitation. Meanwhile, Jason grew increasingly distant. Work meetings ran late. When home, he spent more time with Eleanor than with me, often falling asleep beside her bed. The final straw came when I found my father in distress. "She took them," he said, clutching my arm. "The little blue ones. Said I didn't need them." I checked his medication. The cognitive enhancers were missing half a month's doses. When confronted, Eleanor expressed innocent concern. "He seemed over-medicated, dear. I was only trying to help." That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, facing the truth. Eleanor was systematically destroying what mattered to me: my marriage, my father's care, even my company, as Jason's distraction affected our business. As I sipped my tea, I heard the front door open. A figure appeared, my mirror image, but sharper. "Well," Carol said, setting down her suitcase. "You look terrible." I gave a choked laugh. "Thanks. You look exactly like me. Except better rested and dressed." She took my hands in hers. "Tell me everything." And finally, I did. Carol didn't waste time after our kitchen reunion. She took charge with the efficiency that had built her empire. "Has your father seen a different doctor since Eleanor arrived?" she asked, pouring tea. I shook my head. "Just his regular neurologist. We need a second opinion. Someone with no connection to Jason or his mother." Her eyes, identical to mine but sharper, assessed me. "How long has this been happening?" 3 months since she moved in. It's gotten worse lately." "And Jason's business? Any changes there?" I hesitated, uncomfortable discussing my marriage with someone who'd been absent for 20 years. "He's distracted. Missing meetings. Our projects are suffering." "What about Eleanor? What does a former nurse with chronic fatigue do all day?" "Rests. Calls Jason constantly. Spends time with Dad when I'm working." My voice broke. "I think she's tampering with his medication." Carol squeezed my hand. "I believe you." Those simple words unleashed months of suppressed emotions. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I confessed, I think I made a terrible mistake marrying Jason. Let's gather evidence first, Carol said. The next morning, she reunited with father. His eyes lit up with recognition. Kitten. You've come home. Carol's composed facade cracked as she embraced him. I've missed you, Dad. Eleanor appeared, leaning on her cane, though I'd noticed she needed it less when unobserved. Another visitor, she said. How overwhelming for William in his condition. Carol gave Eleanor an evaluating stare. Mrs. Collins. We met at the wedding, though you were busy throwing glassware. Eleanor's smile tightened. Ancient history. We're family now. Are we? Carol's tone was pleasant, but her eyes were ice. Jason entered, surprised. Carol? Marian didn't mention you were visiting. Family emergency, she replied smoothly. Dad's declining faster than expected. I've arranged for a specialist today. That's unnecessary, Eleanor interjected. William's doctors are excellent. I'd like another perspective, Carol stated firmly. The specialist, a renowned neurologist who owed Carol a favor, arrived that afternoon. His symptoms seem inconsistent with typical progression, she said privately afterward. Meaning? Carol pressed. Either his case is unusually aggressive, or something else is affecting his cognition. While Eleanor was at therapy, conveniently scheduled by Carol, we began investigating. Carol installed discrete cameras in Dad's room and the medication area. Is this legal? I whispered. Completely. It's your home, and we're monitoring for safety. She continued working. I've also hired investigators to look into Eleanor's background. That evening, while Jason was at a late meeting, the investigators delivered their findings. Eleanor Collins worked as a geriatric nurse specializing in dementia care until her license was suspended following a patient complaint. What complaint? I asked. The family alleged she administered incorrect medications and convinced the patient to change their will in her favor. It was settled out of court. That doesn't prove she's hurting Dad, I said, though my heart raced. No, but this might. Carol showed me footage of Eleanor entering his room, checking for observers, then swapping pills from his organizer with different ones from her pocket. She's been sedating him, the specialist confirmed after examining the recovered pills. This could absolutely cause his accelerated symptoms. I felt ill. But why? Carol led me to Jason's office and unlocked his desk. Inside were documents analyzing my company's vulnerabilities and acquisition strategies, plus copies of confidential board communications discussing concerns about my leadership given my caregiving responsibilities. They're planning a takeover, Carol said quietly. Jason gets controlling interest due to your diminished capacity while caring for Dad, then Eleanor helps remove you entirely. That's insane, I whispered. Jason loves me. Maybe. But he also loves power and money. The final proof came that night. Believing we were out, Jason and Eleanor spoke freely, unaware of recording devices. She's bringing in outside doctors, Eleanor said angrily. That sister is suspicious. It doesn't matter, Jason replied. The board meeting is next week. Once they name me co-CEO due to Marian's family situation, we can accelerate the plan. And her father? Your adjustments have convinced everyone his condition is worsening. After the board meeting, we can suggest facility care. With both Marian and William out of the way, consolidating control will be simple. The recording ended. I sat in stunned silence. He never loved me, I said hollowly. It was all a lie. Carol squeezed my shoulder. Now we fight back. The next morning, I confronted Jason as he prepared to leave with documents from my private files. Going somewhere important? I asked. He startled. Just the office. With Sullivan Tech? About acquiring my neural interface patents? His face was drained of all colors. Marion, I can explain. Save it, I interrupted as Carol entered. We know everything. The medication tampering. The board manipulation. Your plans with my company. Our company, he corrected automatically, then realized his error. So it's true. My last hope vanished. It was all about my company. Eleanor appeared without her cane. Jason, what's happening? Your plan failed, Carol answered. We have everything on record. Jason's expression hardened. You can't prove anything. We can, I said, steadier than I felt. The police have copies of everything, including footage of your mother altering my father's medication. It was a bluff, but it worked. Eleanor's face contorted with rage. No one will believe a menopausal CEO hallucinating conspiracies while failing to care for her dementia-ridden father. The specialist's report and recovered pills will be convincing, Carol interjected. Jason changed tactics. Marion, I know how this looks. But I did fall in love with you. That part was real. I remembered his recorded words about consolidating control. Get out, I said quietly. Both of you. Now. This is my home too, Jason protested. It's my property, I corrected. Purchased before our marriage. Eleanor laughed bitterly. You'll regret this. No one will believe you over us. Actually, Carol interrupted, the board already believes us. I sent them the evidence last night. Jason's face went ashen. You're bluffing. I've built and destroyed companies larger than yours, Carol replied coldly. I don't bluff. When they finally left, I collapsed onto the sofa, emotionally drained. How could I have been so stupid? I whispered. Carol sat beside me. You weren't stupid. You were hopeful. There's a difference. What now? I asked, feeling lost. Now we rebuild. You're not alone anymore, Marion. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but Carol was right. I wasn't alone anymore. It's time to end this, I agreed, newfound determination rising within me. Once and for all. Several days later. We need a comprehensive plan, Carol said, spreading documents across my dining room table. Legal, corporate, and personal. It was 3 days after confronting Jason and Eleanor. They'd left the house, but were still in the city, making veiled threats through their suddenly hired attorneys. Dad's safety is our first priority, I said, glancing toward his room where a trusted nurse now stayed round the clock. Already handled, Carol replied. I've arranged transfer to the Holbrook Center tomorrow. They specialize in dementia care, and their medical director is an old friend who's been fully briefed on the situation. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you. Now for your company. Carol pulled up financial projections on her laptop. Jason's startup is actually in serious trouble. Those innovations he claimed were breakthroughs? Mostly smoke and mirrors to attract your investment. And I fell for it completely. We all make mistakes. Carol's voice softened momentarily before returning to business. His company is cash poor and heavily leveraged. That's why he accelerated the timeline. He needs your company's resources before his collapses. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for Jason. Had any part of our relationship been real? The memory of his recorded conversation with Eleanor answered that question. What are you thinking? Carol asked, noticing my expression. Just processing it all. I did love him, you know. Carol nodded. I understand. But right now, we need to focus on protecting what you've built. She outlined our counter strategy, thorough documentation of Eleanor's medication tampering for police and elder protection services, termination of all funding to Jason's company, emergency board meeting before their planned coup, and a surprising twist, a strategic alliance between my company and Carol's international conglomerate. This partnership makes perfect sense, Carol explained. Your neural interface technology complements our European medical imaging systems. Together, we could revolutionize non-invasive treatments. I studied my twin's face, so like mine yet marked by different experiences. You've given this a lot of thought. I've been watching your career for years, she admitted. I always thought we might work together someday. Just not under these circumstances. For the first time in days, I smiled genuinely. Better late than never. The GrayMed Technologies annual shareholders meeting was held in the grand ballroom of the Lexington Hotel. I arrived early with Carol, both of us dressed in matching charcoal suits, a deliberate choice to emphasize our connection. My executive team greeted us with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Board members clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. The tension was palpable. Ready? Carol asked as we surveyed the room. I nodded, my resolve firm. More than ready. Jason and Eleanor arrived with calculated timing, late enough to make an entrance, but not so late as to seem disrespectful. Eleanor had abandoned her cane completely, now playing the role of concerned mother-in-law rather than invalid. Jason approached me with his hand extended, as if we were merely business associates. Marian. I was hoping we could speak privately before the meeting. I think we've said all we need to say to each other, I replied evenly. His confident smile faltered slightly. You're making a mistake. This could all be resolved amicably. You mean I could surrender my company quietly? I don't think so. The meeting began precisely on schedule. After preliminary business, Jason made his move, rising to address the chairman. I'd like to propose a special resolution, he announced. Given recent concerns about leadership stability, I believe it's in the company's best interest to establish a co-CEO structure. Murmurs rippled through the audience. As many of you know, Jason continued smoothly, Dr. Gray has been dealing with significant personal challenges, her father's illness, the stress of caregiving, all admirable priorities, but ones that have understandably affected her capacity to lead this company fully. Eleanor nodded sympathetically from her seat, playing her part perfectly. Furthermore, Jason added, recent behavior suggests emotional instability. Paranoid accusations, erratic decision-making. If I may interrupt, Carol said, standing. Since we're discussing Dr. Gray's leadership, perhaps I should introduce myself. I'm Carol Gray, CEO of International Medical Innovations. The room fell silent. Most recognized the name of the European medical technology giant. My sister has indeed been facing challenges, Carol acknowledged. The most significant being corporate espionage and elder abuse perpetrated by her husband and mother-in-law. Gasps and whispers erupted. Carol methodically presented our evidence, financial documentation showing Jason's company was near bankruptcy, footage of Eleanor tampering with my father's medication, recorded conversations revealing their plan to seize control of GrayMed. Furthermore, she continued, I've brought documentation of Eleanor Collins' history of similar behavior, a pattern of inserting herself into the lives of vulnerable individuals, manipulating their healthcare, and attempting to control their assets. Eleanor jumped to her feet. This is absurd. She's lying. The evidence speaks for itself, I said, finding my voice. And yes, I've been under stress, who wouldn't be? Discovering their spouse married them to steal their company. I turned to address the shareholders directly. I founded this company 25 years ago. I've navigated it through recessions, technological revolutions, and fierce competition. My age and gender have always been used against me, but never have I faced such a personal betrayal. The room was completely silent now. I'm not asking for your sympathy, I continued. I'm asking for your rational assessment. Look at our performance metrics. Review the evidence. Then decide if GrayMed would be better served by remaining under my leadership, or being handed to a failing startup with a fraudulent business model. When I finished, the chairman cleared his throat. In light of these extraordinary allegations, I suggest we adjourn briefly to review the documentation. That won't be necessary, said Margaret Chan, our largest institutional investor, rising from her seat. I've seen enough. My firm retains full confidence in Dr. Gray's leadership and categorically rejects this attempted hostile takeover. One by one, major shareholders stood to express similar sentiments. Jason's face had gone ashen. Eleanor was frantically whispering to their attorney. When the security team arrived to escort them from the building, Jason made one last desperate plea. Marion, please, I did care for you. This got out of hand, but we can fix it. I looked into his eyes, those blue eyes that had once seemed so sincere, and felt nothing but pity. Goodbye, Jason. 3 years after my world shattered and reformed, I stood on the observation deck of our new advanced neural care center, watching elderly patients in the garden below. Some walked with assistants, others sat in wheelchairs, but all wore the sleek neural interface headbands that GrayMed and International Medical Innovations had jointly developed. A gentle hand touched my shoulder. Admiring your handiwork? Carol asked, joining me at the railing. Our handiwork, I corrected, smiling at my twin. The Second Chance Initiative, as we'd named it, had revolutionized dementia care. Our neural interface technology didn't cure the disease, but it significantly improved quality of life, helping patients retain memories longer, reducing confusion, and enabling clearer communication with loved ones. My father had been the first recipient. How's Dad today? I asked as we walked toward the private wing where he resided. Having one of his good days, Carol replied. He was telling the nurses about that fishing trip we took to Minnesota when we were 10. The one where you fell in the lake trying to grab that huge bass with your hands? Carol laughed. That's the one. His long-term memory is remarkable on days like this. We found him in the sunroom, chessboard set up before him, deep in concentration. At 81, he still maintained the dignified bearing that had characterized his medical career, though his movements were slower now. Bear. Kitten, he called us out. Just in time. I need worthy opponents. As we joined him for chess, a game he still occasionally won despite his condition, I marveled at how different my life had become. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had instead opened a door to something I'd never expected, reconciliation with my twin and a renewed relationship with my father. Check, Dad announced triumphantly, his eyes twinkling. Later, during our weekly dinner at my penthouse, Carol raised her glass. To the newest member of Forbes' most influential women in business list. Again. I rolled my eyes but couldn't suppress my smile. The interview was ridiculous. They were more interested in the scandal than our medical breakthroughs. People love drama, Carol shrugged. But they also respect resilience. The media had indeed been fascinated by my story, the CEO who discovered her younger husband's plot to steal her company, only to emerge stronger and more successful. Eleanor was still serving her sentence for elder abuse and fraud. Jason, after his probation ended, had moved to Seattle to work for a tech company, far from the medical industry and the reputation he'd destroyed. Speaking of the interview, Carol said casually, "You didn't mention Robert." I felt a flush creep up my neck. It wasn't relevant. Your relationship with one of the country's leading neurologists isn't relevant to your work in neural interface technology? Carol's eyebrow arched teasingly. Robert Chan had entered my life 6 months ago when he consulted on our clinical trials. At 60, he was brilliant, kind, and unencumbered by the insecurities that had plagued my relationship with Jason. Our connection had developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared passion for our work. It's still new, I said. And after everything with Jason, I'm proceeding cautiously. Carol nodded. Understandable. But from what I've seen, he genuinely cares for you, not your company or your position. Time will tell, I replied, though secretly, I already knew. Robert saw me as I was, a complete person with strengths, flaws, and yes, wrinkles. The difference was liberating. As we finished dinner, I stepped onto the balcony where, 3 years earlier, I had sat broken and betrayed, wondering how to rebuild my life. Now the same city lights sparkled below, but I viewed them through different eyes. Carol joined me, somehow sensing my reflection. Penny, for your thoughts? I was just thinking about what I've learned, I said. How sometimes what seems like the end is really a beginning. At 56, I no longer feared aging. Each year had brought wisdom, confidence, and perspective that no youth-obsessed culture could diminish. The woman who once worried about being too old for love now recognized her true value. You know, Carol said thoughtfully, Mom would be proud of us. Finding our way back to each other after all these years. I blinked back unexpected tears. I think she would. Our mother had always told us that family wasn't just about blood, it was about who stood beside you when life was hardest. I'd lost the family I thought I was building with Jason, but had rediscovered the one that had been there all along. We make a good team, don't we? I said, linking my arm through hers. The best, Carol agreed. Took us long enough to figure it out. As we stood together, mirror images with matching strands of silver in our hair, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been what I expected, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. Life hadn't ended at 53, as I'd once feared it might. Instead, I'd found a new beginning, with my sister, with my father, with my work, and perhaps even with love again. The betrayal that once seemed unbearable had ultimately given me the greatest gift, the chance to become fully myself, undiminished and unafraid. And that, I realized, was worth everything I'd endured.